Why, hello there. Today I wanted to talk about omiyage. Omiyage is usually translated to English as souvenir, but it's a little bit different from what we might think of in the West as a souvenir. Omiyage are gifts that you bring back for people when you go away somewhere, and they're very common in Japan, especially between coworkers. So when you go somewhere, you bring back omiyage for your coworkers, particularly if you used time off work to go, and it's a way of showing gratitude for the people who were working while you weren't. So, this is something that, as far as I know, doesn't exist in Western culture, and it can seem a little daunting and confusing at first. So, I wanted to share some tips and things that I've learned about omiyage since moving here, like who to give them to, how to give them out, and what make appropriate and good omiyage, in the hopes that I can help someone who might be feeling worried about it like I was. So, let's get started. For this video, I'm going to talk about the who, what, and how of omiyage, and I'm going to break each part down into the first omiyage that you should bring from your home country, and another part for the general omiyage that you bring back from places that you travel to around Japan. So, I'm going to start with who, and I'm going to start with the first omiyage that you bring, because that was the most confusing part for me. So, who should you bring omiyage for when you move to Japan? I can't speak very much for people who are going on an exchange program, although I'm assuming that you should just bring omiyage for maybe your school and definitely your host family if you have one. I can talk much more about an English teacher / work position. So when I came from New Zealand, I brought omiyage for my vice principal and principal at both of my schools and for my supervisor at my main school. I also packed a bunch of different omiyage that I could give out to people who I didn't know existed yet, and I really recommend doing this. Just pick anything that could be given to anyone and give it out at your leisure and at your discretion. You will thank yourself for it later because it's an amazing way to make connections when you first start work and a way to start conversations with people about your home country. So I think it's really important to just bring quite a lot of different things that you can give out to the people that you think might end up being good friends. So yeah, it's definitely worth bringing the certain ones, like for your bosses and your supervisor, and then bringing extra just in case. Now let's talk about the who for general trips while you're living in Japan. While you're living and working in Japan, you should ideally try to bring back omiyage for every coworker. However, sometimes this is impossible. For example, I work at 2 different schools and each has between 60 and 70 staff, so bringing back omiyage for everyone every time I go somewhere is prohibitively expensive. So there are ways around this. You can choose who you bring back omiyage for. If you're choosing, this should always include your bosses. So for me, that's my principal, vice principal, and supervisor. And then everyone else is pretty much at your discretion. The way that I tend to do this is anyone who knows that I'm going on the trip gets omiyage. So that tends to be my close friends at each school and then also the teachers in my grade. So usually in the staff room you're seated by which grade you teach, and most of the time the grade that you teach, all of those teachers will know what's up and where you're going. So for me, those people get omiyage. Okay, so yeah, you don't always have to bring back omiyage for everyone. You can just choose. Obviously, I recommend bringing it back for everyone when you can, but I think everyone understands that that's not always possible. Okay, next let's talk about what makes good omiyage. And again, I'm going to start with the first omiyage that you bring when you move to Japan. When I first came here, I bought a New Zealand calendar for each of my principals and a bunch of New Zealand honey and many, many New Zealand specific teas. If I could do it over again, I would have changed a couple of things. I would have brought less honey because it is very heavy and I feel like people didn't really get any more enjoyment out of it than they got from the tea, so I probably would have switched out the honeys for teas. The calendars were great and the teas were great, so I probably would have just brought more of those. Tea is actually fantastic because it's very light, and usually when you're moving your whole life to another country, the weight of your suitcase is kind of paramount importance to you. So you should definitely consider teas if your country or like home city has any kind of flavor or like specific fruits and herbs that they make into teas. Those go down great. Japanese people tend to love tea as well, so you know that it's going to get used up. Yeah, tea is like highly, highly, highly recommended. Basically, anything that is specific to your home country or like your local area is fantastic. Plus, anything that's light is also obviously useful. The calendars were really great. I actually do recommend that as well because my principals both used them in their office for the rest of the year, and I thought that that was a really nice thing that it could stay there for the rest of the year. So yeah, calendars and teas are great for your first omiyage when you move here. Now let's talk about what makes good omiyage while you're living and working here. So the basic rule of thumb is that things should be either edible or usable in some way. People get so much omiyage throughout the year that if things weren't edible or usable, they just end up with a bunch of souvenirs cluttering up their desk. So food is of course a great option, and many places in Japan have a specific food that is designed to be brought back as omiyage, and you can buy bulk boxes of them, which is super convenient. So for example, Tokyo banana or the Hokkaido shiro koibito cookies are fantastic omiyage. Everyone will love them. They're all quite famous, so people will know where you went and that you got them like the good omiyage from that place. So yeah, that's a great option, and it's like already made for you. You just buy a box and then it's done. Other things that I've had pretty good success with are skincare things. I tend to go for hand cream or lip balm because they're more unisex and gender neutral, so everyone can use these kinds of things. If I'm feeling particularly generous or I've gone on a particularly big trip or overseas, I will bring back a food item for everyone and also a skincare item. So that's something that you can do. But yeah, basically use your own judgment, and anything that is usable is good. Okay, now let's talk about how to give out omiyage. This might seem like a bit of a strange subject, but it was something that I kind of was concerned about for a while, so maybe I'm just ridiculous, or maybe it really is daunting and a little bit confusing. So anyway, for this one, unfortunately, I can only talk about my own experience as an English teacher, and I'm not really sure how it works outside of that, so sorry. Anyway, first let's talk about when you first arrive in Japan. When you first arrive here, pretty much any time is fine to give the vice principal and your supervisor their omiyage. Both of them usually sit in the staff room, and you'll spend a lot of time, especially with your supervisor, over the first few weeks, so any time is fine. For the principal, you'll most likely get called into their office at some point within the first few weeks, and that's the perfect time to give them their omiyage. So just find those times. Ideally, you should try to give the principal their omiyage first, but I mean, you're pretty new and it's not super important. It'll be fine. And lastly, let's talk about how to give out omiyage while you're living and working here. So there are two basic ways. One is to make an announcement or have someone else make an announcement in the morning meeting that you'll probably have at work, and then you can put the box of omiyage up the front of the office or in the break room at work, and people can go and get it if they want it. You can also do this without making an announcement and just put a note on the box of omiyage saying who it's from and where it's from, and that's fine. You should only do this if you brought enough for everyone, because otherwise it's a little bit awkward. The other way is the way that I really recommend doing, which is to go around separately to everyone and hand out one omiyage to everyone. I not only recommend this because it's less awkward if you didn't bring enough for everyone, but I also recommend it because it's a great way to make connections and start conversations with people that you haven't talked to before at work. I've made a lot of new friends this way, and it just opens up the lines of communication a little bit better. If you didn't bring enough omiyage for everyone, try not to be super obvious about handing out omiyage to only some people. People will definitely still pick up on it, but at least try to be a little bit subtle about it. Right, so I think that's about all I have to say about omiyage. If you have any more questions about it, please do leave a comment and I'll do my best to answer it. Of course, I'm not an expert, this is only my own experience, but I really hope that it was helpful and maybe you're feeling a little bit less worried or nervous about it, especially if you're just about to move to Japan. In the end, it really is the thought that counts. I know that's super cliche, but really your coworkers will appreciate that you're trying to participate in this part of Japanese culture. And really omiyage is about showing your gratitude and showing that you were thinking of people. So the what isn't super important. It's how you give it and that you've given it at all. So just bear that in mind as well. Okay, I think that's about it. And thank you very much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.